Hi, welcome to my video. I'm Jennifer Roberts and you're catching me on my channel, True Divine 44, on the various different platforms that I'm posting it to. So this is another writing on the wall where I just share my knowings, my visions, the energies, just my observations, anything and everything that is quite obviously a writing on the wall, or it needs to be. So following on from the videos that I did about measurement, just and about what's going on right now and where this is all coming from, just to go back, that this at this point is so obvious that this is an ancient story that is in repeat. The problem is there has been a devolvement, a stripping away of even the knowledge bearers and the wisdom bearers. Even the majority of Masons, Freemasons in the various, what would you call it, constituencies, not knowing the half of the real origins of the sons of light, of the bearings of that wisdom and knowledge that was brought forward. And a while back, I remember bringing it up with Wayne Steiger. Check him out if you haven't already. You'd be a fool not to. About this salamander, and also the Sumerian times have been coming up in my mind, and he confirmed that would be very Sumerian. Now, this is strange because this salamander hasn't left me the energy of this salamander and keeps coming up every now and again. And I knew there was keys to it, and I remember saying that to Wayne, that I know there's a key here, there's a door that needs to be opened here, something that needs to be unlocked here that is of use to us in the present, so to speak. So going back to that and thinking about where we are right now, you see, they've taken ancient wisdoms and knowledge, and they have used them to enroll themselves in kingships. That's including the puppets that are presidents or prime ministers, including the puppets that are royalty, you know, the queen, the princes, etc., etc. And they do this to keep this hold on humanity. But at the same time, I feel there's been, at some cataclysmic points, there has been some loss of wisdom, even though they have managed to preserve and hide away a lot of it. There is this lack of understanding of it. I think because a lot of them aren't derived from the same type of bloodlines that started this understanding, this wisdom, these measurements, and therefore these experiments that worked, and through measurements, through being able to define a unit, etc. So going back to that, there is so much regarding the sketches, the carvings in the stones from the Sumerian times, and probably back before then, of how they were cutting, editing, splicing DNA. The snakes being a huge depiction of that. And again, that's, a symbol can be used for good or bad. It's the intent behind it. But the snake being a very sacred being, and therefore representing a very sacred aspect or sacred aspects of the human form, which would be the spine, which would be the Kundalini energy, which would be the divine feminine energy. And so this would speak of it being distorted also into what people would be thinking of reptilian type energies. And I think a lot of that is in power today, and the distorted version of such. And again, they have managed to deliberately, within the Bible and various other books that people follow, distort and devalue the divine feminine by distorting and devaluing the divine serpent. The serpent is seen from Egyptian times and from ancient Egypt, where the cobra is a very sacred being, in that it showed the power and strength of the spine, that would allow it to stand up right upright and tower over a man. That was a sign of strength. It was a sign of true strength in form in front of somebody's eyes. It would be a sight if you ran into it. And so that's why a lot of them had the depictions of the cobras on top of their headdresses, especially the, is it the sarcophaguses that they would have them decorated? If that's not the right word, you know what I mean? And so this is where, you know, we have this distorted view now with the Adam and Eve story of what the serpent actually is. And so it's important, again, like I mentioned in the measurements video, to have context, because I could say, well, I measure a good size dinner for you. I've measured it out and it is a good size. And so in your mind, you would probably think, oh, I'm going to get well fed. But what if that's like one of my auntie's measurements, who eats like a bird, and you know, there's a bird-sized portion on the plate. To her, it would be a good portion. To you, it wouldn't even touch the sides. And so it is about context, and it is about origin as well. And with the amount of distortion that has gone on, no wonder humans are pretty messed up and pretty torn about who they are, always on this quest to learn about who they are. And even when they're not on that quest, sort of pressing the self-destruct button, because they don't want to face that journey of exploration, the work that goes in it and the joy that goes in it, but they don't see the joy, they just see the work. And you notice these people either just follow a cult, like the Christian cult, or they get quite obsessive about not following and not looking, and so not knowing their origins, they do spiral and, you know, get addicted to things. You see this all of the time. And so origin and context is super, super important. And so they've kept a lot of the origin, they've kept a lot of the context, and within doing that, they've been able to mold over the generations the type of direction that they want to go in, that they want humanity to go in, the type of people that they want within that society. Because if somebody doesn't know themselves in knowing thyself, to know thyself, you have to know your origin, you have to know your start. And if you are taught to hate that start, which would, you know, say a lot about the divine serpent, Hydra, it would be known as. If you were to be taught, as we have en masse, to actually despise and fear the divine serpent and see it as something that is terrifying, that is to be feared, then of course you're distorting your view on yourself, which is exactly what they need, because somebody who is in fear, somebody who is in doubt of themselves, somebody who doesn't know themselves is far easier to control, manipulate, and corrupt, and mold. And so this is where they get off doing that. And so if we look at some of the, sent a video to Wayne, I found somebody who goes through all of the temples, showing the knots that are shown in so much of our symbology. I'll try and find some actually while I'm talking. And so in our symbology, there's so many of these knots shown. Let's see which symbols. Hold on. So yeah, these knots are important, and it's so funny that, you know, we still want to send our kids to scouts and things like that to learn about knots. Knots being life-saving if you've got some rope. I know with Abigail, she makes fabulous knots and is in the middle of making something exciting, which I'll be pleased to show when it's done, for horses. But it's all through knot work, and that got me thinking about this too. And so again, universal energies just sending me in the right place to hopefully deliver to you something that is in context that you can use for your greatness and your betterment rather than your detriment. So so yes, these knots are very important, and we've carried that through, but again, without the context in that we would be teaching children while teaching them those knots, that do you know how these are reflected in your DNA, in your in the root, in your origin. And so we see here, let's share the screen. Share. Okay, so these are just off the cuff, as you've just seen. So we've got this here. Now this, if you were to pull the snake's head and the snake's tail here, you have a sacred knot. If you were to, let's see, another one here, if you were to pull these in a certain way, again, you have a sacred knot. There will be so many more. Again, a sacred knot. And we see here, they have used it for big, see, doesn't like that. They've used it for big pharma, but basically this is, you know, I've been going on, if you've been following me for a while, that this is the Holy Grail, and the serpent is part of that. Why? Because the serpent is, for one reason, depicted in our DNA, depicted in our Kundalini energy, and the Holy Grail of power and control, and the Holy Grail of being even able to enter into other dimensions is through the DNA, through the coding, through the encoding, through the editing. And so they've used it for nefarious means for the most part, but it is our own healing process, in the fact that some snake bites, you know, you have the anti-venom that is created from the very venom that caused it, or a different venom. I don't really know the science behind that, but you know what I mean. And so you see that this is absolutely our Holy Grail, and this is what I was talking about before, the symbolism, look, of the snake and the bird, which we'll get into probably on another video, on the top of their head. You know, it is reptilian type energies, but I do feel we've all, some people, some beings are here that aren't reptilian, but there is within our DNA for sure reptilian coding on a great part, on a great scale. And so what's that one? Be interesting, I'll look at that later. The dragon being very important too, you know, of the ancient druids, you know, the dragon creator, the creative one, was very, very important, is still very, very important to them. So you can see here from some of the examples anyway that, you know, these knots are so important and they represent different, I'm still getting into it, so I'll bring you more videos as I get more into it and look through my notes as well, because I'm coming across my old stuff making more sense with the new stuff coming through, with the downloads in the standings or coming across things. Again, here, sacred knots. Now, in one of my logos for my business, it has the two snakes creating a sacred knot, and I just knew I needed to have that in there at the time, not really quite knowing the context. You can see here, look, with this, is this a goddess? In the Indus Valley, you can see here that there is these two snakes are creating this sacred knot here, that when pulled, this creates a knot, and it's an infinite knot, because it would look like the number 8, the symbol of infinity. And so that's like a guy or a girl climbing up the snake's ladder, and that looks like enlightenment, doesn't it? Truly. And here she has the two snakes beside her, and obviously this snake like lower body. and the two snakes are raising up and facing one another. And so this is depicted, it's seen everywhere, we just don't know where to look. Again, the snake eating its own tail, you know, that would be, it's the end of the world kind of thing, where we would see or a change in the world. The dragon coming in with the sun, ancient Egyptian symbol, very super important. And this is all part of our origin. Cars would be very interesting. I mean, look at that. When they're pulled together, they will create, can you imagine if you're pulling the heads and the tails, how those sacred knots would just tighten? That is a really good one. I mean, that's a fantastic one. I'm going to keep that and look at that later. And so it's super interesting from the start anyway. And I've got to do a video on my great, I think it is, uncle, who has been coming forward for me a lot lately, and his sons. And so he actually, at 19 years old, I'll just tell a quick story about him. He became the third or the second biggest ship owner or ship trader in the world. He bought a raggedy old ship with everything that he'd earned, and put it together and worked to be Sir James Knott. And he's been revered in many ways, and his money still is given to charities today in the millions. And so, but Knott's obviously one of his passions, and you know, his surname being Knott. It's funny how things are sort of compiling and coming forward and making sense, and just in divine timing, I suppose. And so these knots have been coming forward for me big style. So I hope you get like a picture of what I'm talking about now. And so this would speak of a lot of the depictions of carvings would speak of cutting and splicing of DNA, the creative process, in particular the creative process of different kinds of beasts and humans. It's the words and the history of code and gene editing that are coming forward. And so it would speak of, when we're looking at teachings, when we're reading things, you realize that we're reading them in the context, like the Bible. You know, people are reading the character names and just taking it for granted that they're being told the truth about that it's actually this character that the lesson is within. And actually, it's usually probably not. It's usually probably about what was going on in the land, or a type of technology or whatever. And so reading things in different ways is very important. So I understand right now that if you look at the Constitution, I've got so many of you that I adore in America. And the Constitution is revered, and if it was used properly, again with the right intent, so it should be. But to be quite frank, in context, it says in the Constitution, all men will be created equal, or all men created equal. What they're skirting around is the fact that they don't see you as men. They see you as cattle, and the rulers are the men. And so this is where the Constitution in these times, as hard as it might seem, along the line, it's looking like, if people don't rise up enough, it's looking like the Constitution will be shown, or their intent behind what the Constitution has for people will be shown. They'll have to show their hand in that, well, actually it means nothing because it doesn't actually apply to you in our context, a bit like my auntie's dinner portions. In our context, that's a good enough deal for you. It doesn't actually apply to you. And so when they're coming out with more and more tyrannical things, when they're coming out with more and more plans that they're working with China, with Afghanistan now, to create the next 9/11 event, this is where it doesn't matter how many people are harmed when they're messing about with weather, and you guys are having such crazy and weird storms in strange places. It doesn't matter how many people are harmed, because at the end of the day, you can be written off as a loss of cattle, which is obviously what is happening right now. That's obviously part of the agenda that I've been screaming on about from the start, from the get-go. Before any of the hints came out, I was telling people they want to sterilize, they want to have mass genocide, they want to depopulate and control and manipulate and actually create a different being altogether for those who survive all of the above. And so again, the Constitution would not apply to those that are being gene edited right now with a special infusion. So again, that context becomes integral before you accept any deal or trust any safety measures or trust any rights that you feel you have. Look deep into it. Look at the history of the people who have quoted the things like the Constitution, the British laws in the past to sort of placate people, to make people feel safe, when actually everything is highlighting the fact that you don't have, in their eyes, control over your life, and actually in their eyes you don't even own yourself. It is for them to manipulate and actually change and edit and code in a different way, and that is your role here within the whole context of it all. And so if you look at even the likes of MAGA, because, and I bring this up because I want it to be in context when the sort of the more and more talk I'm hearing, especially in the spiritual community. I mean, come on, about the savior returning. He's not going to return, but not in the form of president, and he's going to do this, he's going to do that, and I've even heard that this whole thing with Afghanistan is planned to show them. I mean, wasn't it that he had to go along with the special infusion for quite some time, because he was trying to show people what they were all about? How many times do we say, okay, we'll accept the loss of life for the fact of, or the chance or the hope, Ian, of him being this, white hat, I think you call it. MAGA is a direct reference to Ishvaku kings who worship Seth. Historically, Seth ran under, I'm just reading my notes here, under the symbol of the pig. The Egyptian god Seth, also called the satirical goat, was the one who had dominion over death, and quite an important role. And I feel when I look at that energy of Seth, I feel that yeah, in that, because you find with nurses who do end-of-life care, sometimes you wonder, how can they do that job? It must be so dark. But actually, because they face so much death, they're actually very light people, in that they've accepted it, as we should all do, as in times gone by, when the family used to be allowed to prepare the body. It was a familial thing to do that, and the funeral was much more natural and planned by the family, rather than just a business doing it all for you. And so we've become separated from death, and therefore it's become and that's been one thing they've wanted too, because then there's a fear of it, there's an innate fear of death. And so a little bit like that, I see Set as that kind of energy, in that because you are the master of death, and time, that you would be happy to be happy and have fun. And so yeah, probably a partying type of energy. And so, but they have taken that and ran with it, and again distorting this. I think they're so unfair to gods and goddess energies, because they take what seemingly is the duality of gods and goddesses, as there is duality in us, and take the what we would call the base realms of that being, of that energy, and just use that and distort that, so it becomes very imbalanced. And so we live under very imbalanced gods and goddess energies, because the intent, like the symbology used behind them, is very distorted and very misunderstood by even those who, like in Hollywood, are worshippers of this energy. And but they're worshippers in ways of sexual abuse, in ways of partying, and sex with many people, the wrong people and wrong ages, wine, and this is where we see this type of these party animals that have been brought up in the propaganda machines over the last couple of years in particular. Epstein being one of them, Prince Philip being another. And so this is where we see that these leaders are still following something that is of ancient origin. And with that, you see, it was always the priest's job to put forward the ruler's wantings and the ruler's needs of society, to cultivate the society to the needs of the rulers and therefore themselves. And like I predicted way back, we've seen the crossover more so this year and last year than ever before, from the church of being the church to the church being submissive to the church of science. I say the church of science because they've turned and distorted science, which is something that is such a beautiful thing, such an explorative thing, an exciting thing, and could be used as such a healing thing, and such a exposure thing of truths and knowledge and whatnot. They've distorted it into what a machine, another system, another machine that casts the net out and in the direction of their will, and you will be caught in that net no matter what, according to them. And so, now we see these scientists putting forward these needs of these rulers as well as the politicians. Again, that has become yet another church. You're very divided, you're very devout, even when you're being told something right to your face, even when you're hearing the very person you're supporting saying something you would never support, there is an excuse made. It's they're cults. And so, what was I saying all of that for? So yeah, science being the one that is putting forward this, the context of this. And so, do you remember how I said they love to have a laugh at people as well while they're doing these rituals? And so getting it into context again, while when we're talking about the sort of distorted values of Seth being weaponized within these leaders who are on the public stage, we see that we went through a lot of things where, you would see, especially in the UK, it was like at one point, you cannot have sex with your partner. Okay. You cannot have, you can't have sex with somebody who isn't living in the same household. But yet we were seeing all of these sex stories in the propaganda of Prince Philip, the guy in Parliament, what do you call him, having that affair, the one who headed up the British side of things to get us into this mess. What's his name? Hancock. Is it Hancock? Yeah, again, even his name, satirical sort of, the cock that got caught, and so this is where they like to laugh, because while they're saying to you, don't do this, don't do that, they're deliberately making sure that it's put out there. And you see these leaders, whether they know it or not, most of them do know it, believe it or not, that these rituals of embarrassment will occur. And again, he's walked away with all the money he needs. He's done his part, he's done his role of engineering the direction of the train that is the UK into this pandemic. So, you know, he's done his job, he walks away with his money, he's had his ritual of embarrassment, and, you know, all is well. You know, now he can go off with the woman he wanted to be with anyway, blah, blah, blah. You know, his wife will be well taken care of. Or it might be even better for them, the fact that she will be broken by the ritual. Again, that's more louche, that's more energetic harvesting for them. So while they were saying that, they're contradicting it by putting a lot of sex regarding the leaders in the propaganda machine. Again, they were talking, I was talking about them having the plans to sterilize, and that's come out now in many ways. Go to the websites themselves and have a look, I dare you. And of course, that is very true. It seems to be extremely true. And so the sterilization of it, and then all of these stars, including some of the royal family and the so-called prime minister, you know, Boris, useless Johnson, you know, he had his baby for the 100th baby or whatever, how many babies he's got. Meanwhile, again, laughing at the duality of the ritual, in that they are pushing it to have our children and sterilized, and also to have many women, which has been underreported but very much known and seen and witnessed, having bleeding while being pregnant, and many losses of pregnancy, which again will all come out in the wash. People will hang their heads. And so they like to have these contradictions. So, but without the context of what they're doing, we just can sort of, even if you're awake and aware, you can write it off as saying, oh, useless, oh, they're such bastards. But actually, when you can see that it's much deeper than that, they're not just making a fool of themselves and contradicting themselves just for the sake of it. It's all about the coding of the ritual and getting the right amount of energetic exchange going within that ritual. You saw the fact that there was no parties allowed. So all of the things that they've distorted and worshipped, set over, the sex, the parties, the drugs, the women and men and affairs and whatnot. They've been making sure that you've heard about them while banning you from doing them. You know, there they are at G7. And telling everybody else they can't get together, they can't have a family dinner, they can't go and see their grandparents. So all of that is out of context, and all of that within their context isn't making sense. But again, people are under the spell. They're not putting two and two together. They're not seeing what's actually happening to them. This is all part of the, like, a communistic type breakdown also of the people, breaking their will. Like people say they're breaking in a horse. These contradictions for the brain, and therefore the loneliness that is attached to all of these rules and regulations, the isolation, the distance, the 666 distance, all of those things are ways and means of breaking down the soul, breaking down the back of the person. So they're much easier, again, to control through fear, and to get this plan pushed along as fast as possible. So if we look at way back, as I was speaking, when I was showing those symbols, talking about the coding, the gene editing, and the creation of beings, a lot of this knowledge got lost, yes, but a lot of it got kept to one side. And they've obviously gotten to a point, Hitler helping them a lot, ironically. Well, not ironically, because that system is still deeply, deeply embedded in the UK and in America and in Australia for sure. And it's really showing its hand. But now they've sort of gotten around to the point of having the technology again, not quite on par with the ancient ones, but, you know, very much getting close or close enough to start playing around. And they literally are just playing around. And so this is why they would call it an experiment. That's through their own words. But again, people are taking it out of context, because at the same time they're saying, you must save lives. So, you know, they put in the dualistic twist on it, you know, sprinkling that on the ingredients. So we see that the cutting and splicing of DNA, it's actually all written through the Bible. It's just hidden in the code, and the distorted words, they're hard to put together. But the snake, the 33 degrees rising of the spine of a sovereign, in that, you know, when you can get your snake to rise up that spine and reach the top, as I was describing in the last video, the feeling is immense, and you do feel different. You carry yourself differently. You do feel energized. You are a cobra standing up without aid. And so this is the this is also, you know how the judgment card was coming out so much, and I need to find it while I'm talking, because the judgment card was coming up. Do you remember so much in readings leading up to this video? So it was, in this one, it is depicted as Moses. And I kept saying, there's more to this, there's more to this that I need to find out. And of course, it's come, you know, the knowledge, it's come, you know, when you're seeking that knowledge, it does come. And when you're open to it, it sometimes flows through like the sea. And so trying to get it all out, you know, you get excited and wanted to get it all out, and there's just no time, but you just have to let it absorb and be delivered and understood, and build on it even more. And so I'm just gonna find it here. This is where I love tarot, because there's this mix of just ancient knowledge that can then be found in all of these divided societies of the Christian cult, etc., the Freemason cult, and all of those things. So, but it's in here. The symbology is in here, and I can't find my judgment card. So hold on a minute, I'll find some picture of it. We'll go around the problem. So 1 second. What have I written there? Judgment. Okay, let me find. That's not the one I want. Hey, baby. Chocolatey face.
I lost.
Well, here, this one will work. Let's do this one. So in this one, the judgment card, you can see here, it's the rising up of the from the tomb, and this would speak to, and they've come from the waters, and there's a frequency. So, you know, when you see them, when my mom lived in Iran, you saw them doing the snake charming, where they literally charm the snake with music out of the basket. And she said it is so clever and so beautiful to watch. And it's revered, you know, that these snakes will come up out of the basket. So you can see here that it looks very much like snake charming, doesn't it? That this trumpet sound or flute sound is coming from the skies, and they are rising up, they're standing upright, and they're bare, and a lot of that spinal energy, a lot of that kundalini energy does you know, because you've had to work to get there, work to get to that point of being a bit of able to raise up that Kundalini energy, then, you know, you do have to, you're naked, you're raw, or you're not ashamed to be naked because you've been on the sharper end of knowing your inner self. You've been through all of that journey that has caused you to be able to stand up like a cobra can stand up with its own strength. And so there is that to this story for sure. And then, so this one here, let's see, I'll stop the screen share. So this one here also, this is the one I wanted, where you can see that, where you can see, can you see there? Moses. It's a depiction of Moses on this deck and is part in the seas. And so, you know, again, I knew, because in this deck in particular, the judgment card came up. And so there is the parting of the seas. So there's a strength here, and he's got his staff, and it's his staff that is doing it. Again, a serpent being representative of his staff. And the angelic realm being knowing of it, being above there, witnessing it, maybe even delivering power to be able to do such a thing. But it is part in the seas and part in the people. If you look at it, those people are going through a divided sea and dividing themselves from the land that they used to belong to. And so again, this is coding, this is code for gene editing, this is code for separation, division, coding of a being, of peoples. And so the watered down text of the raising of Nehushtan to cure the people with Moses, it is actually a plagiarism of the old Naga text, the immortals. So it talks about that these different secret societies and mystery schools that we have today, not being anywhere near what we had then. Of course, a lot of the knowledge being lost and distorted and watered down. But, you know, they still take on board a lot of the things. That's why we do have the 33-degree Masons, again, because of that 33 degrees of the spine to be a sovereign. You know, we have the different, the 33 being very applicable to the Jesus character in the Bible. So this is where it talks about the fact that it's raising the body to be a sovereign and learning how to stand within that, but without the context of what is sovereign, of what is what do those rulers that rule over our lives deem as sovereign. We see the queen over here, you know, being spoken of as a sovereign over the land. That would say that she owns the land and everything in it. Bullshit. But in their context, in their definition, she owns the land and everything in it. And she, because of her sovereign state, is a one step closer than everybody else to God, and sort of is a deliverer of rulings, because, you know, she is from his place, and the church, you know, is her right hand, you know, her long arm, so to speak. And so that's in their definition. So we see that being a sovereign, when we're saying be sovereign, be free, again, we really need to get to grips and context and the definition of what is sovereign. Somebody who is sovereign in their eyes is knowing of their origin. And so it really is important that we dig deep into our origin and find out as much as we can, because that brings more context, it brings more definition, it brings more of a knowing of self in order to be able to even begin to be sovereign. And so it's important that we know our own familial history as well as this ancient history. It's important that we know our own familial history. And for those of you who were adopted, fostered, and it's very difficult for you to know your familial history, then go straight to the ancient origins. Don't be down about it. Go straight to the ancient origins. Could just Gina didn't cut that bit out, and go straight to the ancient knowings and knowing yourself more through that context. So we see that we see it in the way that they don't show their feet, or they show 1 foot, and that would be while the snake was cursed, so to speak. So this is where it lost its feet, and you know, it had to crawl along the ground forevermore. You know, snakes, as little beings as they are, big beings in this realm, I don't think they feel like poor little things at all. They know they're beautiful, they know they're powerful, they know they're stealthy, you know, so there's I don't think, but again, they just need to breed that fear, that innate fear, and also distortion of self, since the serpent is very dear to our origins in a way that can't be ignored. So it says here, the sovereign would be the first one to unite both worlds, above and below, that upper and lower Egypt thing. And so the first thing you would need to do in your context, in your definition, is, again, something that I'm a bit preachy about, is you can't just be all light. Roots in the dark, in the ground, roots are white. You bring your light to the rest of you, you disperse it. So you bring yourself in balance of knowing your root and knowing your upper self. I'm a bit funny about saying higher self, your upper self, to be able to balance the two and use the two, and to be in a united space within yourself with your upper and lower Egypt. And start in at the lower. That's where your seed is, that's where your creation is. You were created in the lower aspects of a being. You were cooked in a womb in the dark, and how beautiful is that process. And so there is this context of, even in the spiritual community, of having a greater understanding that it is not just all light. You can't actually even just have light without the dark, because, you know, to a certain extent, you know, that dark space helps with the light absorption. To a certain extent, that dark space protects the whitest part of you. If you're looking at a plant, you know, and the white, delicate roots, it doesn't need to be pummeled with hard rays. It needs to have that covering, that soil, that grounding, to protect it, and just have the rays and frequencies within those rays dispersed throughout the soil into the roots. And so it's really powerful to say that being a sovereign in this context, in this definition, in this ancient context, which is much closer to our origins than the bullshit history that we're taught, than the bullshit propaganda that we listen to each day, is balance. But balance is a key. Balance is a key towards your Kundalini energy, towards your serpent energy. A serpent, a cobra standing up, the greatest heights of a man, would be, you know, that's a balanced thing in itself. It's very balanced, and it has to be strong. In order to do that, you get strong by knowing yourself in your ground roots first, and then being able to have enlightenment thereafter. And to create beautiful fruits thereafter, that would then nourish again the grounding. It's cyclical to create this continuous balance and wholeness within self. With this, the more people that are doing this, you know, if you're thinking and listening to me now and thinking, well, this would be a fruitless act right now as to where we are right now. Well, no, that's not the case. A little bit like death, don't ignore knowings because they frighten you. Don't ignore other beings because they frighten you. You know, the more you know, the more choices you have in whatever transition you go through, whether it's a transitional experience through this lifetime, or whether it is the transitional experience into what we call death. It is yet another birth. You would be able to have more dominion and more control over that process if you are in more knowledge of what may be there for you on the other side, so to speak. To learn about the dimensions, to learn from the science, from the spiritual, from the physical, from the experience, for all of it, from the guides. So this is where being a sovereign now actually prepares you, just as we say, don't just, go into the dark night unprepared, don't go into death, which we will all face at one point, without preparation. This still would cause for what is to come, because it's going to get nasty. For what is to come, it gives you that preparation to be able to stand up for yourself, and in particular your children, and for others and their children. If you are strengthening that snake, if you are strengthening that balance, it's going to pay off. Again, in another context, it is absolutely going to pay off, because the more people doing this, the more people saying, oh, it's useless now, then, that's going to be useless. But the more people doing this now actually has still a chance to change the trajectory of where we're going. The direction that we are being pushed into, it does give us this air of authority, and actually using their own rules against themselves, which are our rules that were stolen, that works in that, there are certain ways that we need to start speaking to them, knowing about common law, knowing about sovereign rights, and being able to state them confidently can get you out of a lot of sticky situations, let alone allow other people to see you standing up as a sovereign and speaking as a sovereign being. It gives off an energetic pulse, so to speak, and that is an energetic pulse that they do not want to be handed out throughout the communities, throughout society. And so it's about this balance of the upper and lower worlds, for one, for this sovereign state. And so this would then give you the right, in their eyes even, to challenge the fact. Ask your, they're not called parliamentary members, but yeah, ask parliamentary members as well. What do you see us as? In the wording and the context of that wording, do you see us as cattle? Is it that the way this is worded and the way you people are taught how to read this in context, is the context actually that we are not beings of light, that we, even though we are made up of light through our DNA codes, is it, do you feel that you own us? Or is the writing that you're following, or is the laws that you're following, does that give you the right in your context, in your definition? Does that give you the right to decide for us, decide for our children? Push them on that, give them that. If you're in Australia, push them on that, give them that. Ask them those questions. Guarantee they won't answer, or I guarantee they'll give you a very convoluted answer, but they'll look shocked at that question. It's all about asking the right questions. Always, it's the right question. But it talks about uniting the forces, uniting the upper and lower parts of self. It unites that force that has a pulsar type effect. You have that Kundalini energy flowing, and you have that balance between your upper and lower worlds within yourself. And you stand up in any case as a sovereign, any experience that you're going through as a sovereign. I guarantee you, you will either deter people from challenging you, or you will have people drop a gun if they're holding it to you. This is a shocking type of energy to encounter, and this is something they want us to forget our origins of. So this is it's a little bit like when, you know, I went into that garage with that armed robbery. I went in there with absolute, there was fear for a second, and then it was like, oh, I've got to do something. And then I can transmute fear pretty quickly and pretty well. And then fear for me turns into either rage, a force to be reckoned with, a righteous indignation. And so sometimes fear for me can work, especially when I see other people in fear. Sometimes I can really transmute that into a very useful energy where I'll stand up to giants. And, you know, size wise, this person's a giant. But I went in there as a sovereign, I went in there as a mother. I went in there in my divine feminine energy and gave out words that really anybody else would say, stupid, why did you do that? But because I know how to channel that force, it came out with such a force that had the person backing down against all odds. And so I'm not saying it's going to save everybody, but I'm saying it's going to change the direction for sure. Because if enough of us were really acting sovereign, we're really, you know, being brave enough to come out and talk like this, being brave enough to be out there and talk like that, the same way I was with those officers the other day, then, you know, the more we're going to have the control of the direction that we want to go in, rather than the direction that we're being pushed towards. So what else have I written? So in the Naga texts, knowings, carvings, it would say that they were the craftsmen of DNA, and they were the craftsmen of DNA with light, which would talk about the things that have come there after that, you know, even in the Druid sector of the communities being called the sons of light. This is where, you know, that there has been a moment of building the being or crafting the being, and even in the Bible, in the diluted form, you know, the builders of cities, but, you know, Joseph, the father of Jesus, being a carpenter, a craftsman with wood. You know, and so it would speak of things that are being made, things that are being manufactured or edited or molded, you know, created, and through a lot of frequency, through this creation, splicing, editing of DNA. And, you know, if there's been this point, which I really do feel there has been, of building these bodies, of building these vessels, that I don't feel are so inferior in the whole aspects of self, to be quite frank. I think these avatars are fantastic. I was born in ways that my mom could have lost me many times over. And my body, even with the things that I came in with, which I think are effects of my granddad, that said he would never have children. And he was sprayed with Agent Orange. He had to go to a university when they did get back to the UK for months to be studied. And he was, you know, part of the ones that said you'll never have children. And he didn't have any children at that point. He ended up having 8 children, 2 miscarriages and 6 children, who've all had children. But there's been these health issues that are rare, that have repeated through the family. Me being pretty worse off out of the whole family with what I was born with. And so, you know, there's that. But my body's fantastic. It even counteracts that. Most people wouldn't know I've got anything wrong with me. Even pain-wise, I can fantastically transmute that. So these avatars, I feel, are special. You know, I fall in love with these avatars. I fall in love with the spirit of my children, each being so different. But, you know, I look at their faces and damn, I'm in love. I'm in love with those faces. I'm in love with those eyes. Those eyes on those children of mine. damn, they can get away with a lot with those eyes looking into mine. Theodore knows that the most and probably exploits it the most out of all of them. But yeah, what was I saying? So the body, you know, if it was made and consciousness, you know, maybe it was made in a benevolent way. In that, you know, there was this knowing of this consciousness. Even these nagas, these peoples, being attached to that certain energy, those certain consciousnesses, which we would now call spirits, maybe. Maybe it was a benevolent thing. I don't know. Things are so distorted, but I don't think it was all negative to build these fantabulous avatars that are such magical things. The features on people's faces, you know, they're beautiful and they should be given reverence. And if you're not giving your body reverence, and I've been guilty of that in the past, and they've ironically been at my most poorly or deathly stages. You love your body. My granny used to kiss her arm and I used to say, why are you kissing yourself, granny? She's like, because I love me. I love me. She loved her pearly skin. She loved her with the way that she looked. And that shone a light from her. She was a light being. She did exude light because she appreciated herself. It wasn't egotistical. It was a balanced way, but she appreciated the body. She appreciated that that body had carried 8 pregnancies. She appreciated that that body, ironically, like me, had broken its back, but healed against all odds, being told she wouldn't walk again. So maybe, you know, this body was created. Maybe it was a good thing, because it's not all bad. I love the fact that I can attach my consciousness to this body. And I'll probably not mourn this body when it's gone, but, you know, give reverence to its passing, because I've got to know it. It's carried my babies. So if these fantastic things were engineered, then so be it. One way or another, coming down the line, it's been a pretty good job. And it's created this realm that consciousness can be in a very physical way. So, but what I don't like is the distortion now, because that's all out of context. Because everything that they're doing right now about the gene editing, about the creating of a new being, which I called way back when, and I wish I had more people listening, because I did call all this. People who have been following me know this. I did. I was saying, don't trust 4 of the injections. They're going to bring out 4, and they're going to be for different biological people, biologically different people, ethnic type. And then I came across the ethno-bomb type things that they've already created. And so, you know, it all makes sense now, but right now it's not in a benevolent way. It's in a way of the very few people that have had control of this realm for a very long time, and through the systems that they've built, want to create another level of slave being that can be, that they don't even have to work so hard in education and pharmaceutical and law to code and mind melt control. They can just speak a frequency into the brain and have it be done. So right now we do have to get to grips with context, our context of what is sovereign and divine, and take into note, if you want to be sensible about it, what I've said here about the ancient ones knowing of the context of what is sovereign. It is sovereign to balance out again your upper and lower bodies. It is a balancing act. Look at the cross. if you look at, you know, to be your own cornerstone, to be your own foundation, to govern your own self, you know, to govern your mind rather than government governing your mind. You taking control of that and you governing your mind, you being the governor. And so these are aspects of things within the context of what we're going through right now that we can start doing now, and we can start measuring it by the way that people are with us, the way that people, there's somebody that's listening to me, I've got to say it right now, that is going through a domestically violent situation. And I am with you 100%. I feel you, I can feel your energy. And I've been through it for a long, long time. And it is not pretty. And it is basically focused in energy of everything I speak about these governments right now, of absolutely condensed, concentrated energetic force against one person. And not just from one person, because this type of person will do everything to turn everyone against you, and you feel so alone. And I know that right now this is going to sound like to you that this will do nothing in your situation, but you being able to do the inner work to find that those sovereign snakes within yourself, to be able to love yourself again and let go of all of that that's been spoken over you for so long, to be able to free yourself from that, the reaction that you will start to get from other people, to let go of the fear of judgment from others, to take control of your life by saying, this is my experience. You will see a difference. You will even see a difference in the violence. Until you get out of there, you will see a difference in the level of violence. There will be a reluctancy to raise their hand to you again. So please take that on board and know that it is said with love. But in this kind of situation that I feel you're in, whoever you are, and I'm not going to describe your promise, but in this kind of situation, it's no good being there, it's okay. That kills women in particular. I needed to get to a point where I took my responsibility on board of how I got here, why I got here, and how I'm going to get out. And part of that was not being a victim anymore, being a sovereign, being a queen, and, you know, putting that energy out that my granny did of loving self, appreciating self, and seeing the differences straight away, even in just the small things. And that allowing the universe to open up a way of me getting out. You bring it in, you manifest it in. So please take that on board, whoever that is who's listening. I'm sending you much love, but much truth as well, and that's what you need to get out of it. So the sovereign being the context of it, and knowing that these writings that we are sort of relying on now and hoping on now, the constitutions, the laws in the UK, etc., they've just changed them. All they needed to do was have the context and definition of the Emergency Use Act. And so again, the powers and controls, it's being shown that they will just change the goalposts whenever they like. They'll change the pillars whenever they like. And so it is no good relying on those things. And if you put them to the fire and actually ask them the real context and definition of those words, and whether they actually apply to you to keep you safe, you'll find it's either very difficult for them to answer, or they don't know what to say at all. So it is about raising your own frequency first, and then being able to expand that out. A lot of you are feeling the pressure and sort of feeling the pressure of living under the context of the government via the context and distorted view of loved ones that are trying to push you into just going with the narrative and doing the gene editing thing. This is where, again, just like I spoke to that sweet lady, this is where you've got to stand up and actually, when you do raise this snake, when you do manage to do that, either a lot of these complaints towards you will just die out, or you will have the strength to say no in a way that they just do not bring it up again. And so there's that for you also. So under these systems, we are slaves. Under the context of these systems, if you look into the deepest meanings and the intent behind them, we are slaves. It is ridiculous that a royal family exists, particularly a royal family like this, with such, let's say, German World War II ties. It's crazy, actually, when I think about it, how that is still happening. So this is where we have to get to the context of not relying on the systems, because they're breaking down the systems deliberately. This is the stepping up of the one world order, the Chinese communist type rule. This is the using of our bodies like produce on a scale that hasn't been seen before. It's crazy, actually. It's crazy that we're allowing it to happen. I'm trying not to allow it to happen, but too many people are still allowing it to happen. So, and they've created a system where they put the context in of what is sovereign and what is divine. Again, we see that we have to be able to see through the lies, see through the bullshit, because just as the priests for the royal families used to go out and share the stories, like in The Witcher, you had that singer that goes around and sings the sagas, the stories of the great Witcher. This is where that happened and still happens through the church, and sort of putting on this divinity cloak over the queen via the church. And now we see that through science, but we also see that through propaganda. We also see that through the TV, and we also see it through the internet. The internet is a fantastic thing, but we can't forget that it was actually a military operation to create it. So we do need to cut out that kind of magic. We need to edit that out. How we do that on a grand scale for those that are so steeped that it is their hypnotherapy session to sit on the couch from 5 p.m. till 10 p.m., go to bed, and then get up and go to work. If not, nearly even go to work, sit on the couch again and watch the same again. That's difficult. We can't do much about that. Well, there's some things we could do, but I wouldn't mention it, I wouldn't dream of it. But this is where we do have to take on board how we get around these systems and how we get around the context that they're putting out there, that gives the definition of what they want rather than what we would want. But just to know that this is ancient. And I did say over and over, there was going to be so much more coming out about the context and the definitions of frequencies of light, of how it can heal, how it can destroy, how it can charge, how it can discharge, how it can deploy. All of these different applications of light and frequency put in certain equations, making different effects. And so this is really coming forward. And so for us right now, there is this energy coming forward of ancient knowings being known and heard. But it is for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. And it's also for us to see the distortion of where that wisdom, where that knowledge has been stolen and then distorted into something that is dark, into something that is evil, into something that is a driving force of just the darkness, of just the lower aspects of Seth, or their distorted lens of that energy. And so this is where we do need to get context and definition and somehow get through to people who are sort of in the middle a little bit, sort of on the fence still of, you know, you do realize you're just following something because they've just made up some numbers. You do realize this, it might be a bit of a pointless task for the most part, because, you know, a lot of them are done. But, you know, it's just to put a video out here and get this going and get the conversation flowing and continue on the back of the other videos to continuously dig down deeper and hopefully find more and more of our origins and how we can apply them in our daily lives today and how we can actually apply them in our futures by being in the present moment and taking the wisdom and knowledge and using it for our greatness rather than our demise. So much love, balance, and wholeness. I appreciate you all so, so much, and I'll see you all real soon. Mwah.